Here it is, library construction's on the 29th.
Just make a note somewhere so that you can talk about where and when.
Public safety building.
And we are on air. I hereby call the 2,252nd meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have no special reports tonight, so we start right off the consent agenda, which tonight includes the minutes of the July 11th, 2017 study session and the July 18th, 2017 work and regular sessions, a resolution authorizing the purchase of a CAT 914M wheel loader, a resolution acting as the local contract review board approving a contract for the 42nd Avenue reconstruction project to Brown Contracting, a resolution authorizing the city manager to approve a contract in the amount not to exceed $198,213 for services related to the Well Number 2 project. And lastly, an Oregon Liquor Control Commission application for LATAP, 11301 Southeast 21st Avenue, a new outlet. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
No.
I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Audience participation. Let me see. So, Rick, are you in audience participation, or are you speaking on one of the items on our agenda?
No, I'm here for Rivers West. We're with a 501c3 living couple.
Okay, so give me a second here. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear citizen statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out a green speaker card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during the public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, is there any follow-up reports from the August 1st, 2017 audience participation? Ms. Ober?
There is not.
All righty. In that case, Rick, if you'd come up and tell us your name and address for the record.
My name is Rick Hendon.
Go ahead and have a seat right there, and you can speak into that microphone.
Okay, good. My voice is leaving me. My name is Rick Hendon. I am at 4298 Woodside Circle in Lake Oswego. And I'm here representing Rivers West. We're a small nonprofit organization. We've enjoyed 501c3 status since 1991. And we are advocates of instruction, construction, and use of low-impact human-scale boats. If any of you have been to the Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle at the south end of Lake Union, they have a magnificent floating shop and office, and on the beach, a huge two-story clear windows where at night it looks like a light bulb, and inside that, boats are being built all the time. It's a living museum. We want to become that in the Portland area. We're looking for, we have about 4,500 feet, I guess, of shop space now. We have every conceivable shop tool you can imagine, standing and hand tools, and goos and glues and clamps. And if for $50 a year you can join, and we'll teach you how to build a wooden boat. We would like to be an anchor in a neighborhood that's in a development that would enjoy a living museum. We would like to be a standalone, perhaps in a lease situation, a sweetheart lease with a municipality where we can build a building and become a part of the community. We've just started a capital campaign. We will have enough money to secure an option on a property and then raise the entire capital for that over the next 2 years, probably. We could also, if we found a lease situation, we could immediately commit ourselves to that. We've determined not to borrow any money. We're raising all this, and we're getting a lot of support and a lot of enthusiasm. And you have greeted us with open arms here. Alma was so wonderful and met me on no notice and talked to me through and invited me here. I appreciate it. So that's us.
All right.
Any questions?
I just want to make sure you're not affiliated with the boat school that's in our North Industrial?
We're not.
You're not. Okay. Do you know about them?
I think that our organization does. I personally don't.
Okay.
You don't have a facility currently?
We do. We have a leased facility almost underneath I-5 freeway on the Monoma Channel. We have about 150 homeless people as neighbors. And we need a space that's easier to get to and is really can become a part of the community. Their goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. So we're going to move agenda items around just a tick tonight and break with tradition of making Chuck go last. So we could go ahead and do that one now if you want.
That'd be great.
That way you guys can get out of here. So let me find that.
It's E.
Citizen Utility Advisory Board Bylaws Resolution, considering the resolution accepting the CUAB bylaws. And this will be presented by Engineering Director Chuck Eaton and our new engineer, who I met just today.
Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce you to one of our newest employees, Jennifer Garbely. She's the Assistant City Engineer. So she joined us here just last week, I believe. So we're excited to have her, and I'm really excited for the help. So
Been kind of busy lately.
this will work out great. Unfortunately, Joel was going to be here tonight, and he called at the last minute and said he could not make it. So unfortunately, I do not have a CUAB member representative here. I will try to articulate the best I can their input into the bylaws. What you have before you tonight is an action request from them to accept the bylaws. They're asking that you accept the bylaws as they originally presented them at the work session. If you remember, you guys asked them for consideration of some changes. They did have a meeting at the first Wednesday of this month to discuss those changes, and they elected to pursue just submitting the original ones. So what you have in your packet is attachment 1 is just making sure that's the original bylaws that they have now. Attachment 2 is the bylaws as I interpreted your changes from the work session. Attachment 3 is the bylaws they approved. So,
Which is a copy of the original bylaws?
right. No, it's with the red line
with the
strikeouts that they
changes.
made changes to the original bylaws.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, they only changed the 7 p.m., the 7-day before. I guess that's the only two things they
Changed that to
changed.
6 o'clock, I think,
Yeah.
right?
So why
Or
did
from
they
6
want
to
to
7.
not have language that was less restrictive about the date of the meeting? I mean, I don't see what the downside to that change was.
They felt that these worked best for them as a citizen committee, and that they didn't have an objection if council wanted to have them make a change, but they felt they liked the bylaws they put together and wanted to present them back to you.
Well, one of the things I noticed was that it, and I can't find it offhand, but it spoke to the bylaws speak of two things about minutes, or about notices. One, that they will be posted, here it is. The public shall be notified of all board meetings by the city's general notification procedures, which says, 5 days or whatever. And then we had suggested the at least 7 days, which they didn't, or it was in there, it was at least 7 days, so they took that out. So it seems to me that they would be done in accordance with the city's general procedures for all committees and everything anyhow, so I'm fine with not having the...
Actually, the way they propose it, if you want to look at a clean copy, attachment 4 is the clean copy of the proposal, which would be considered Exhibit A if the resolution is passed, the way they have it, and it says that shall be responsible for mailing the agenda and all meeting materials to members and interested members of the public before the next scheduled meeting. They've taken all language out about general procedures and...
And do you actually mail, snail mail? You don't
No, we do
email?
everything
It's
through
email.
But it's email, mail, right?
Through ComCon, yeah, we do everything
Yeah.
through the intersection, just like you guys can.
What was maybe 7 days is too much, or I can't remember now what the concern was, but like, couldn't we do 3 or 2? This idea that we could just hit the send button on an email 10 minutes before the meeting.
Oh, that's not good,
Doesn't
yeah.
go over well to me.
Yeah,
I forgot the reason why.
why they didn't?
Why 7 days? I think 7 days was too cumbersome for them, or for whomever.
Probably for staff, yeah.
You know, that's a good question. I can't answer that particular question. I can answer you that in the attachment, we had, based upon the minute, and when I reviewed the tape, basically we had tried to change it and proposed 7 days on the agenda, and then the meeting packet materials, similar to how you guys receive them, you know, just a few
Weekend
days before. But the general discussion is that they kind of liked the flexibility, and that was the way they wanted. And if council wanted to tell them otherwise, they were okay with that too, but they would rather have you just tell them if you want a certain number of days.
We did.
I guess they would rather have you change the bylaws.
So we just write their bylaws and approve them. All right, so
So
we're going
if
to now
you-
write in that they all have to wear short pants at all the meetings.
So if you, I mean, I do have a supplemental resolution to enact bylaws that are in attachment 3, which is what I thought your interpretation of what the thing was, if that's the way you guys decide. But they would prefer having the flexibility to just kind of set up their times as they would do it as they
But the
go.
resolution as it is right now is to accept the ones that aren't changed by us, but were changed
By them.
slightly by them.
Very slightly changed by them.
Yeah. And that's the proposed red line addition.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
then,
Attachment 3.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
has the May 3rd date that they approved them.
Right. You know, if that's what they want to
I'm
do.
fine with
that's-
that.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it seems funny to me to not let the meeting date in particular have more flexibility.
But if it works for them right now, and if something happens and it needs to come back to us,
We'll
it will.
consider it again.
So I respect their diligence on that.
My
So-
concern is not about the meeting date, which I think the meeting date should be scheduled. So I disagreed with giving the flexibility for that. But materials for a public meeting, to me, should be made public within a reasonable time. And having this completely open-ended just, in my opinion, gives too much flexibility. I think part of a public meeting issue is that you are giving notice to the public, not only that you are having a meeting, but here's what we are going to discuss, and here's the packet. And if 7's too much, you know, Friday before, or, I don't know, 3 days, I'm open to reducing the 7 if that's the problem. But I don't personally like having.
So, Councilor Abma, one of the options that we do have is these are the bylaws of the committee, not of the staff. So the staff can make commitments to you tonight about what we will do moving forward and how much information we are providing publicly, because we are the ones to produce that packet. So if you would like to approve the minutes of the group without having that language changed, we can make a commitment tonight that we will do this, 7 days agenda, 5 days minimum for information, and that otherwise we don't recommend making any amendments to the packet. It's up to you.
And we currently do that with our staff, is we post everything 7 days, so.
Yeah.
Days.
And that's the city's general notification procedures as noted in here, right? But that's just the agenda, and that's not the packet, right?
We try to get everything posted
Do
7
you?
days.
I mean, you try to, but, so, yes.
I agree with you. It's
Yeah.
regarding money. This, it's if it's the art mob, it's a different thing because it's not in discussion of what people are going to pay every month, right? I do believe, as do you, that they have a fairly serious task, and I agree with you that it should be in their bylaws when their meeting's going to be, when the materials are available for people to read, so they can attend that meeting if they feel it's important. So I'd be open to hearing a proposal from you or a motion from you to set a number of days before. If they felt like 7 was too tough, 5, 3, whatever it is.
5 seems reasonable.
Current bylaws say 7, is that correct? The bylaws as they stand today?
Correct. The current bylaws says 7 days before a scheduled
That's what
meeting.
they're striking. They said 6 striking.
Chuck,
The
do you-
way they talked about it during the meeting, we proposed, we discussed it quite at length, and actually the committee did, and we came up with 7 days for an agenda, and they came up with 24 hours for the packet, I think is what it says in Addendum 3.
Remember
I don't
the
think
version
24
that
hours
said
is
that?
enough time for a packet like that.
That was during deliberations at the meeting on the first of this month.
So 7 for the agenda, 24 hours for the packet itself.
Yeah, that if you look at the wording that they came up with, because they actually came up with the whole new agenda and then decided not to proceed with it, so, or bylaws, so.
So if we said 2 days before, that would be out by end of day on Monday. That gives people a little bit of time to read a packet. Otherwise, you're talking about Friday.
I mean, the flip side of this is Administrator Ober said, I mean, we put these together. I mean, it is a policy decision. We can just make a policy statement too that, staff will have these things out at this particular time frame.
What works for you as far as time?
I wouldn't want to wait till Monday myself. I'd want to have them out Friday before we leave.
So 4 days before? All right?
Because they meet on Wednesdays.
Right.
So,
So as
That'd
long
be
as,
actually 5 days before.
yeah, they meet on the first Wednesday.
So Friday evening, end of day Friday is 5 days before.
yeah. And 5 days is good, I think. It gives people, and it gives them a weekend time too to be looking at it, which is good. So are you suggesting that we could, and our city manager, are you suggesting that we could look at that piece of it separate from the bylaws? Or
No,
are
we
you
just-
guys
as a
suggesting
motion,
to
we
add
say-
it to the bylaws?
As a motion, somebody says, adding back in at least 5 days before the next scheduled
Okay,
meeting.
I gotcha.
I wasn't at their meeting, but I wonder, is it that they didn't want to direct the engineering director to stick to this timeline, and they just wanted city council to be the one to direct that?
I guess I can't really answer to that.
Okay. Because this isn't asking CUAB members to do this. It's
It's asking staff.
asking staff to do it.
Yeah.
It was more of a sentiment that they're a volunteer board and they need some flexibility to work within what works for them as a volunteer board. That was-
But they're not the ones
I would
doing.
want the materials as soon as I
Soon
can.
as
Possibly, they have time to read it.
But
Can't argue that.
Especially with what they're dealing with usually.
But it's more than just them who are doing fine work, and it's a hard job. It's about public notice, in my opinion, and the public needs notice of materials. They need to know if they're, that's the whole point of the public meetings laws, is you want to know, you're having a meeting, this is what we're discussing. So I think 5 is fine,
Okay.
if that works for everyone.
So just, we can just use their version and change.
What we do is just go back to the original parent version for that paragraph and change 7 to 5, right?
Yeah.
So that would be Article 3, number 4. We would use the original version and change 7 to 5. And I do have another resolution, and the only change for that resolution says that it's as a result, in the resolve statement says as amended by council for you to execute, so.
Okay, always. Where,
You want to go for the
Gonna
motion?
take a stab?
I move that, well, let me see where we have here. I move that
E, item E.
E.
Yep.
I move to approve the resolution accepting the Citizen Utility Advisory Board bylaws with the exception that we change the packet materials from no time frame to 5 days, at least 5 days, being posted and delivered.
In Article 3.
Article 3.
Please, number 4.
I'll second that.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution accepting the Citizens Utility Advisory Board bylaws, amending them in Article 3, number 4, to change 7 days to 5. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet you.
It was very nice to meet you. Look forward to working
Welcome
with you.
aboard.
I'm excited. Thank
And
you.
it's Jennifer, was it?
Yes.
Very nice. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Was your desk piled like this when you walked in the first day?
And we actually had it totally clean.
It is
Yeah,
no
the pile
longer,
was hidden
right.
behind the door. All righty. Done. Okay. Now we're back on track. Item B, dissolution of the Riverfront Task Force, a resolution. I'm guessing that
I'm
our
doing this, yeah, if you don't mind me sitting
city
from
manager
here.
will.
So in 1998, the council created a board that was working on what we're hopefully in a few minutes going to change to Milwaukie Bay Park. In 2011, we actually amended that process to create what we now see as the Riverfront Board. So the group that's been really working on helping us get through phase 1 and phase 2 of the construction associated with that park. During that time, the board has assisted with the securing of Metro grants, raised money, assisted with DOT about getting approvals on 99E. They've been a huge help in getting the design to where it is today, and it's been a big lift. About, let's see, a year ago, I would say, maybe a little over, that board decided that they were going to go on to hiatus because they felt like there wasn't anything more that they could give at this time in order to assist. Really, they started looking at whether or not they should be doing fundraising or what components they could help with on that lift. We also looked at the fact that this is duplicated in part by the PARB, by the Parks and Recreation Board, and that group really was also weighing in on the same matters. So over, at least since I've been here, over the last 10 months, this council has talked about removing that board, which was the recommendation of the group, and moving it towards the PARB and having their last member be considered as a member of the PARB group instead of having two separate boards. So in 2011, that group was constituted by a resolution, which is why you have a resolution in your packet tonight to actually create the dissolution of that task force. I forwarded you an email from the last remaining member of that group, and that's Gary Klein. He's sorry he can't be here tonight, but he really appreciated the conversation with all of you last meeting in which he talked about his concerns about making sure that he can remain engaged. He knew about tonight's meeting because I talked to him today. We continue to talk to Gary about making sure that we understand original intents, looking at his drawings and understanding that project and its historical perspective as we move forward into the next iteration or phase 3. So with that, I would turn over to you to ask if you have any questions for me tonight.
Yep, seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
No
Okay.
questions, but just a comment that they did wonderful work and amazing job, and kudos to Mr. Klein for
Yeah, Mr.
being tall and still remaining involved, and
Yeah.
And Dave Green, who was the longtime chair of that, and Mike Stacy, who represented the voters' interests in that, and there were 5 or 6 people over the years who were very active in that.
Yeah, that was probably the longest standing group of, because
Yeah.
it didn't change.
Right.
People really didn't change.
Yeah,
Right?
that's true. The others
Longest standing
changed.
group of people working on the city. So, yes, they did a great job and they got us to where we are.
So with that, it would be a motion to approve the resolution if you're interested.
I move to approve the resolution dissolving the Riverfront Task Force.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the resolution dissolving the Riverfront Task Force. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. Next, we have the renaming of Riverfront Park to Milwaukie Bay Park.
Absolutely. So this has been a process that we've been working on again since I came here to move this name actually to its original name. So if you look back on the historical documents associated with this park and when the area was actually formulated by Lot Whitcomb, the intent was that this would be called Milwaukie Bay. And so this goes back to those historical documents. We've taken this through the full process. We've gotten approvals from the NDAs that are associated as well as from the PARB. And at this point, it's a simple vote for you if you're interested in changing the name from Riverfront to Milwaukie Bay Park.
And I would also say that folks that have been on various iterations of the city council down through the decades have long advocated for this name change. So it's...
So with that, Mayor and council members, I would move to adopt Milwaukie Bay Park as the new name for Milwaukie Riverfront Park.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to adopt Milwaukie Bay Park as the new name for Milwaukie Riverfront Park. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None heard.
Yay.
Thank you.
So that seemed very anticlimactic.
It did. It's actually a
Something
big
that
deal.
we,
Went on for decades.
went on for
Yeah.
decades. And a year ago, we had some very active people from the Milwaukee Museum and from some active neighbors advocating for it. So even though
Stoll
they're not
Brothers
here
amongst them.
tonight,
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be very happy to see this action
Yes.
has been taken. Because I have gotten questions like, when are you guys doing that park renaming?
I think it's partially because I've just been calling it Milwaukie Bay Park for about 6 months, and
Oh, we just
everybody
kind
thought
of,
it was already done, so.
I thought it would just take,
Did it
right?
by fiat. That's official.
Do we get to use fiat?
Yeah.
All right. So next up, we have request for qualifications, selection process, and disposition discussion for Coho Point at Kellogg Creek, a resolution. This will be introduced by our Community Development Director, Alma Flores.
And it's Layla's first meeting, so you're going to introduce her to us?
I will be.
Okay.
1 second. Just get myself here. Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Alma Flores, Community Development Director for the City of Milwaukee. Joining me this evening is our newest member. She's actually our oldest one now that you met, Jennifer, because she started 2 weeks ago. Her name is Layla Aman, and she's now serving as our development manager, basically my right hand on all of these downtown development projects that we're actively working through. So we're here before you, as you just read off, to request the following action: to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with BlackRock LLC for the purpose of establishing terms for a development agreement for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek property. And joining me, before I go through the PowerPoint, joining us tonight are several members of the Selection Advisory Group that were mentioned in the staff report. And I want to just call them out by name. Catherine Grabowski-Johnson with Clackamas County Economic Development. sitting in the yellow sweater. Patrick McLaughlin, who serves as the Transit-Oriented Development Senior Project Manager for Metro, who is in the plaid. Yep. And Jerry Johnson with Johnson Economics, a private economic consulting firm here in town, and he's next to Patrick. Furthermore, we also have Dr. Farid Boulari with BlackRock LLC. Joining him is Angela Crier with BlackRock as well. Waving their hands now. And they're here to lend support to this recommendation of staff for the disposition and eventual development agreement for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek site. So just to reiterate what we've gone through in terms of the selection process, based on several work sessions that we had earlier in the year related to the criteria for the solicitation for this RFQ process. And we had the date of the release of the RFQ on April 21st with submittals on May 25th. I'm happy to report that we had 9 proposals submitted. This is a great indication of the development potential for Milwaukie as a whole, and more specifically, obviously, for this site. So in this market, this is a great indicator of good things to come for the city in terms of achieving other visions and development projects that we are already starting to see some progress on, not including our own public opportunity site. On June 22nd, we had developer interviews and, we had the selection advisory group recommendation. We met with this selection advisory group that I have presented 3 out of the 6 members of. Mitch Neiman, the assistant to the city manager, was one of the members. Haley Fish, the finance director, and myself were the other 3 of the 6 that were part of that process. We went through an evaluation based on the 3 primary criteria on team qualifications, on the vision to address the criteria that we put forth. And just as a reminder on the criteria, the council requested that we have a 5-story mixed-use building, a signature project, to serve as a gateway to downtown, given its location at the edge of McLaughlin and Washington. Maximize the city's desire to help revitalize downtown. It was important to have another development project happening in the near term, given that the last one in the downtown was the North Main Village project, which is now 15 years old. Provide housing options that meet a variety of incomes, provide a sustainable and equitable transit-oriented development, provide green construction, and be an environmental neighbor to Kellogg Creek, since it is adjacent to that amenity. Minimize the impact of construction on the Milwaukie Farmers Market at its 2018 location, and this is in reference to having the farmers market relocate along Main Street in the south downtown portion, which is adjacent to this property, knowing very well that we have intention to also have a development agreement for the Harrison and Main Street site across the street. And then utility connections that reflect the needs of the users, so high-speed internet, et cetera, was also a criteria, and that was reflective of a desire to bring more dark fiber or greater and better utility connections on the internet front for our users downtown and throughout the city, and having this be maybe a starting point and a catalyzer for that. And then, of course, have the financial wherewithal to be able to fund such a project, since the goal is to at least see a project within our lifetime, I suppose, was the greater timeline that we could expect, but certainly within the near term. And based on the responses of those 9 proposals that were submitted, the selection advisory group recommended that we interview the top 4 based on the rankings that we received. BlackRock scored the highest in that ranking process, with Guardian second and Gorilla third, with Northwest Housing Northwest Housing Alternatives scoring the fourth. There was a distance enough between them that going to the fifth one, the Selection Advisory Group, can I just call it SAG from here on? I think that'll just be easier. The SAG recommended that we just that we interview the top 4 at that time. And so when that decision was made, we moved forward with scheduling interviews with those top 4 and created the set of questions to be asked at that time. So all 4 were interviewed as well, because it is such a difficult process in terms of the selection, and going based simply on a proposal, a paper proposal, wasn't enough to really make that distinction as clear as it could be. And since the rankings were close enough, the SAG felt that it was important to have these interviews. So we had held the interviews, and after that process was over, we debriefed as a group, and at the time, for the SAG, they wanted to move forward with exclusive negotiations with one proposal, namely BlackRock. And in the spirit of making sure that we were making the most sound decision at that time, I asked them to name their top 2 just to give me something to work with. And 5 out of the 6 said, I can't give you my top 2. My top 2 would still be BlackRock. Or if I had to assign my vote to 2, both would go to BlackRock. So that was highly indicative of the passion behind their decision as a group toward that selection, and that's what we're here before you with that recommendation. Many of the things that I heard to that effect in terms of why BlackRock, in terms of the vision, I'm going to state a few items in terms of what distinguished, oh, you're already on that slide, thank you. Why the Selection Advisory Group made that recommendation, or is making this recommendation to move forward with BlackRock. On their qualifications as a team, they've worked on 2 previous projects, including the Union at St. John's, which is a 103-unit, 20,000 square foot commercial mixed-use project currently under construction in St. John's neighborhood in Portland. The architecture, the SAG felt architecture and construction team have a very deep experience in creating good design and bringing the construction online in a timely way. Their project team even went so far as to include a civil engineer to address the constraints, the environmental constraints that are there on this site, namely the floodplain issues and other environmental issues related to the project. So that that alone separated them from the pack. They were the only ones to bring in that level of expertise into the conversation around the site, understanding very well that this is not a perfect site to work with. It has multiple constraints, as we all know. In terms of the vision, the SAG felt the design intent focuses on the human scale and integrates the natural, they understood the need to integrate the natural landscape and leverage the transit bike access while serving multiple modes of transportation given its proximity to light rail. The importance of activating the main street with uses that reflect community values and goals to revitalize downtown retail that is complementary to existing businesses, and create an iconic building that capitalizes on its location as a gateway and proximity to natural resources and views of the Willamette River. They also had the strongest comprehension of the site constraints and opportunities, in our opinion, where they brought forth those constraints, but also brought forth solutions on how they might approach it in partnership with the city and addressing multiple goals. They also had a strong community engagement approach where they proposed proposed a development partner with the City of Milwaukee's business owners and property owners. They're passionate, they're local about the community. They express that passion, having a presence in the downtown with Dr. Bellari's personal dentistry and oral surgery business downtown in the adjacent building. One comment was, I peer out to this site every day that I'm doing my business, and I have great plans and great visions for what could be there. And they resonated with the SAG in terms of not only BlackRock's vision of that site, but also how it resonated with our own vision of what to see on that site. They proposed a proactive community engagement strategy for gathering input on the development related to housing, retail, and other community goals. They brought an example of their work in St. John's in terms of working hand in glove with the Main Street Alliance that's there, the neighborhood associations, and really holding out in terms of understanding the retail needs of the community and really saying to them, what is it that you would like to see here? And we will try to recruit for that type of business based on your input as a community for the need of the area. That stood out. They also have made strides in their other work to have intentional outreach to local, and will do this in the process, outreach to local Milwaukee-based firms, engagement with local high schools, and work with local high schools to participate in construction-related educational opportunities. That was also something that distinguished them, where they were willing to not only create this iconic gateway development, but also work with our local members of the community to maybe have this be a workforce development experience that they could see. Maybe Waldorf kids could come out and see how construction is being developed. The high school, they have their own project on their particular piece of property that's coming online too, and this could help capitalize on several construction projects in and around the high school for them to, serve as a model for construction workers that are so much in need in the region. In terms of their sustainable practices and their understanding of that portion of the criteria, they would target LEED Gold at a minimum, consider photovoltaic solar power, storm water management, and explore cross-laminated timber, which is a new sort of timber resource that would replace steel in construction of high-rise buildings, and it's been used in Portland and several cities and countries throughout the world. It's being proven as a viable material for from a natural resource perspective that developers could use nowadays. The added bonus, if you will, is that Dr. Bellari and BlackRock own the adjacent property. So this was not a criteria that was set forth by council, but given how important a full block development is to any development, I think having ownership of that additional site allows the city to have two parcels developed alongside one another so that you have better design, better the control of the site and the type of design that you can get based on having two parcels, including the corner, which is integral to how a development could play out, was a plus. With site constraints and floodplain, it's critical to that development to have the full ownership and how you mitigate some of the impacts because of the development. If the development was only the site itself and not the corner lot, you might have some runoff issues to contend with. This allows the full block to be developed in a way that could mitigate some of those environmental impacts. And it lays out the vision clearer for the implementation of the South Downtown Plan, which many of you were here during that process. I believe 3 of you, perhaps. And so you know that looking at the full block development for that site was part of that South Downtown vision. And then the financial capacity of the team seemed the most viable to have this project happen in the near term. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton to Layla, who will go through what is involved in an exclusive negotiating agreement. And I just want to point out that I know that the RFQ stated that we would either, go from the RFQ process to possibly an RFP process, and there was a clause in there that also stated that we could enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with one development proposal should that be an option for us. And in this case, Layla will walk you through why that is our option before you.
Well, Director Flores asked me to talk about what are exclusive negotiations and what is the next step that you're really taking today. So what you're authorizing today is allowing the city manager to enter into an agreement with a developer to move forward into exclusive negotiations. And what that really means is that it signals there's potential for possible agreement, and it basically puts both parties in a place where we're not really talking to anybody else. We're just talking to each other. And the importance of that is that it provides certainty both to the development team as well as to the city. The development team will start to undertake due diligence, which costs money and resources. So having some level of certainty that there is potential for a deal to be made is really critical in terms of what the next step is. The intent, it also helps set a clear deadline. So we will work through that as, assuming approval, we'll work through that. And it requires really both parties to put the best offer on the table. We'll be leveraging public benefit out of this. Developer needs a project that's going to work, and so we need time to kind of work through those details. So that's really the intent of doing these exclusive negotiations. Whatever instrument we decide to use, right now we're talking about an exclusive negotiating agreement. It's a pretty common tool that's used between public entities and private development. There's just other layers of protections in there, but it includes expectations. It will include timeline and other requirements as a basis for negotiation. And the outcome of the exclusive negotiations should be terms for a development agreement. So I put together this little animated slide here, and I just want to point out this isn't a linear process. Some of these things might overlap, but I thought it would be helpful in terms of describing kind of your major decision points coming up and what is the nature of the negotiation process that we'll be doing. So I hope this is at least a halfway decent illustration of what that means. So the first decision is approval. So approval of entering into exclusive negotiations. That's your decision. And we will have to go through a process working with our development partner to determine those terms, and we'll set the terms, come to agreement on those, and then we execute that document. At that point, we are in the exclusive negotiating period. So that's where I mentioned there'll be due diligence. There'll be probably a performance schedule in the document itself that allows, again, both of us, both the city and the development team, to have a clear understanding of what the expectations are on both sides. And so timeline is a big part of that. And then the outcome, as I mentioned, is really getting to development terms. So once we get through, and again, this could extend, so don't look at the bars as being, illustrative of the time frame, but just kind of how the process would move. So ideally, we'll get to a place where both parties agree, the development terms are agreed, and then those are brought to you. So basically, no commitments are made until that decision is approved. At that time, we would then execute a development agreement, whatever that might look like. And at that stage, the development team should be moving forward with final design, permitting, financing. The joint development projects that I've worked on, they typically don't get to closing, so we don't actually convey the land until the project is ready to go. You have all your financing lined up, you have your permits in place, and then at that point, that's when a closing would likely happen. And then ideally, construction starts within a week of that. So that's just very, again, high level of what the process looks like. In terms of timeline, I would expect, given some of the environmental constraints, that, and again, we need to work with our development partners on what that timeline looks like, but it will take some time to work through those terms. But that's kind of the framework in terms of the major decision points and just sort of the basic framework of what we're proposing that you do next. And so the next step would be, again, the recommendation approving the SAG's recommendation for moving forward with exclusive negotiations. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
And actually, may I add just one piece to that, going back to a conversation we had prior? Would you go back to that slide prior? So within this, there is an opportunity for public input.
Oh, yeah.
And so the public input really starts tomorrow with what types of items would you want to see us even talking about around negotiations? So what kinds of things are really important to this community? You know, council gave us those 9 items that we used as our criteria for the bid process. That was a start. But we now have an opportunity to have a conversation with both you and the community about what other things, what's the detail associated with what's really important. Some of this is going to happen in closed. After that, you can't go into negotiations and tell your negotiating opposition what you're doing. So there will be some items in closed, but we can bring all the public content to you in that process for you to make a determination as to what's going to be included in those negotiations. Once we get through the E&A period and we get to your decision, it still doesn't stop. We're still talking about schematics and design work where the community again can get involved and say, not liking it, not working, or yeah, we're starting to go down a path where we feel really good about the trajectory. So it's not in here because this is about your major decision points, but this is, as Layla said, they're
not linear.
Broad, yeah. This is a broad process specific to when you make a choice. This has nothing to do with all the steps that have to go into this process with our community to make sure we get you the right building.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, thank you for the reminder, is that as part of an exclusive negotiating agreement, you can put terms in there that do require public outreach and certain community engagement. It's a very common practice, again, because we are a public entity and we are working on a development project, there should be public benefit and community engagement. And I think that most development partners that propose on publicly owned sites understand that, expect that, and are skilled at doing that. So that will certainly be included as part of the E&A and the outcome.
And to be a little clearer about Layla's history and past, this is what she does. Mm-hmm. So she engages, has in lengths. She has engaged in the ODOT blocks downtown Portland. So this is a part of her experience too, is that this isn't a one-stop. This is the start of a process and a conversation with the existing neighbors in the area as well as those in the broader region.
And I'm very happy that she's here.
So am I. Can I just add that? Thanks.
Thanks. This is a very exciting time, and so I'm privileged to be here, and I'm excited for this opportunity for you and for the community here.
So with that, any questions?
So just to be clear, and for those that are watching, if it turns out after the exclusive negotiating period ends and we just aren't coming to terms, city's not locked in here, is it?
No, it is not. And typically, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to give any legal terms, but typically there is a term included in that. So if you aren't able to reach agreement and the term expires, then you can walk away. There's also typically provisions that allow you to walk away prior to that. I mean, ideally that doesn't happen. Right. But yeah, of course, you want to be able to protect your interests. And so you're not bound to anything but negotiating in good faith and being the best partner that you can. But yes, if we don't reach the end of the term, it doesn't look like that it's going to move forward, then we can walk. Yes.
Apart from staff time, which I know will be a lot, will there be any penalty or cost to the city if we don't come to terms? Is there anything usually in these agreements that say if you don't come to terms, the city owes X?
Dan has this, actually, if you want.
Yeah, but
Councilor, it all depends on the agreement, but there are some times where the developer will say, the city will say, well, we want, a model constructed at a certain point before we make a final decision. And the developer might say, oh, geez, that's $5,000 that we're not otherwise planning to spend. Can you share some of the cost in that? There might be those kinds of terms, but typically, in general anyway, there's no cost to the city other than your staff time and council time and so on.
And those would be negotiated.
Right. Which is why it's all the more important for the development partner to have an exclusive agreement, because that gives them some level of certainty that we're not talking to other folks.
And did anyone else bring a third party to the interviews to discuss the constraints and the flooding and the? You had mentioned that BlackRock brought a civil engineer. Did anyone else do something similar to that?
No.
Questions I had.
I don't have any.
No questions right now.
There's a lot of language in the RFQ that, to the casual observer, would indicate that there's a secondary process of RFPs, and that secondary process would likely include more than one developer. And I believe it also indicates in the RFQ that in that timeline, there would be a public
Open house.
outreach point or a public interaction point with when those RFPs have been returned and there's something to show people. Talk to us a little bit about the reasoning beyond the fact that nobody could come up with a second or whatever. I read the proposal. I read all 9 proposals as well, and I was very impressed by a number of them. I felt like we would get an outstanding building from several of the proposals. So talk a little bit about why you wouldn't just go ahead and have 3 companies go through the RFP process and bring something for the community to see.
Sure. It's a great question. It's not uncommon practice to have the framework that was in the RFQ that you described, so that the city has the option to interview 2 to 3, or the city has the option to move forward with 1. What that allows you to do is if you have 2 super strong teams and it's a real draw, it allows you to kind of vet those a little bit further. I will say that there is significant cost associated with doing a full proposal. It's typically why, in my experience, and what we've done here is that we take the RFQ approach because those things are costly. But that's not, the fundamental reason. I think in most cases, one really does rise to the top. And so by putting more than one option on the table, it can extend the timeline fairly significantly. Again, the development teams do end up taking on quite a bit of cost with no certainty of delivery. But it's nice for the city to have the flexibility. And so I think that my interpretation, and I wasn't here when the RFQ was written, but I probably would have done something similar, is it allows us the flexibility. I think in this case, based on my independent review and what I've reviewed of the SAG's recommendations, it was evident that there was a top winner there, which is why I think that the RFP was designed to allow that movement. So it's not an uncommon practice. I think it's fairly common that public entities, especially if there's a really clear candidate, will move forward with just one. That allows us to move into a lot of the deeper details associated with developing a site like this, which is particularly complex. And again, I think in terms of the public outreach, it enables us to be a lot more thoughtful and intentional about what that outreach looks like, because we're working with one team. We know that team is putting their best foot forward to make this deal work. So what is presented is often more realistic. There's a lot more financial analysis done as part of that. Whereas when you just kind of have 2 proposals, it can sometimes be just, it's not as deep, I would say. So I hope that answers your question.
I guess I don't see where you think the document creates that expectation. I mean, I see under development offering selection process, it's got two. It says we could select a number of teams for a second round process, or we could opt to select a single team, but I don't see other language in there that sort of creates some expectation.
RS 52.
I didn't
Yeah,
either,
RS 52
but
is what I'm looking at.
I didn't see anything about, I mean, it was a short time period anyhow, so I didn't see anything about expectation of public open houses or input.
So the very
In that.
opening page, the last sentence says the RFQ process will move into the RFP process to the top teams, which is a weird sentence, but in any case, it indicates there's more than one and that there'll be an RFP process.
It specifically says
in the-
there are 4 options.
I'm saying where our RFQ document talks about that there would be the potential or the likelihood of RFPs and more than one design team.
So the reference there is in the development offering selection process in terms of the role that the city could take. It could elect to proceed in any of the following or possibly other directions, and we're coming before you with the recommendation of the exclusive negotiating agreement because of the city may opt to select a single team for one or more of the development opportunities without going to a second round process. Under the scenario, the city would enter directly into negotiations with the preferred single team. So that's why we're recommending that, because we didn't have to, or the SAG felt that it didn't need to follow that process if that opt-out
Got it.
statement was in there.
I'm answering Lisa's question where she's not seeing any of these indications. On page RS 49, the bottom sentence, or the second to last sentence, the top 3 development teams may be invited to submit to the full request for proposals for this site.
May.
That's true. It says may be.
May.
It doesn't say will be or shall be.
And
It
no.
says they may be. And it explains that in that other section that Alma Flores
I
was just
finish
reading
what I'm
from.
saying.
I'm sorry,
And then you
Mayor.
can all jump on me
I'm sorry,
after
Mayor.
that. In the schedule, it calls out top RFQ responses will be asked for to submit a full RFP by June 21st. Request for proposals, RFP due July 27th. RFP design open house, August 3rd. Winning project selected by council, August city council session. That's a pretty clear indication that there's going to be more than one.
Well, they're all marked tentative.
And that, I would assume, if I was
And
reading
that's on
that,
the same
means
page.
that the date will be tentative.
I
not that the
wouldn't read it that way.
Objects will be
Under-
tentative.
Given what it follows at the top of that page, I wouldn't read it that way.
In any case, I thought she did a fine job of answering the question, and if you hadn't pushed it, we would have stopped right there. But
Thank you. We appreciate that,
Just to, if you're going to push back, expect resistance. I think this is it's a solid team, and we're very likely to get an outstanding building from this team, as I think we would have from a handful of the development teams that had proposed. I've learned a lot from this process. I know what I would do differently going forward. I'm excited about working with this team to create a building, and I would encourage all the other teams that weren't chosen for this process to come back to us at the next site, because I think there were some outstanding proposals that weren't included in this.
Agreed. Yeah, let's hope they do. So if I may, And if there's no other discussion with that, I'd like to approve the resolution authorizing, oh, I'm sorry.
We
Was there
weren't
more?
even
I'm sorry.
at discussion yet, actually. We were asking follow-up questions,
Yeah, oh, okay.
and then we started discussing.
We did.
And, I actually, because it came up, and I just wanted to make sure, since I really appreciated that Dr. Bellari is here, a concern came up about profits and whether or not that BlackRock was the same BlackRock without a space, a REIT. And so I just I wondered, since we had him here, if he might answer that concern.
Hello.
Hi.
So the question was about the identity of BlackRock and BlackRock LLC, I understand, and I just was wondering if you might be able to answer the question about whether or not this is a real estate investment trust, which will be sending profits perhaps abroad.
It's not. The BlackRock LLC is my entity, basically. It was established a few years back, and basically it's an umbrella company for other real estate that I own.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
It's a wholly owned,
Yes.
it's wholly owned by you?
It's wholly owned by me. yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we had
Thank you.
an email earlier about that, too. Yeah, so that helps reiterate that. Yeah, good.
Since we have the doctor here, any other questions for him?
I don't have any questions for him.
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Did you have questions?
I don't really have any questions. I thought, I don't know, we're going to have a little discussion about.
We will have discussion. Is everybody good with questions?
Got no more questions? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. So, discussion.
Well, before we launch into discussion, I should disclose, we don't have our normal kind of a script because I guess this isn't a formal land use decision, but I am a 12 or 13-year patient of Dr. Belluri's. He's been my dentist since I moved to Oregon, and but I have no relationship with him outside the doctor-patient relationship, and I have not seen him since this RFQ process began.
Well, now I do have a question about cavities, but
You know what he said to me the first time
You know you don't have to tell us this. There's a privilege.
No.
Confidential.
No. He just looked, he said, oh, I just barely opened my mouth. He goes, oh, you didn't grow up in Oregon.
My dentist said the same thing
And
to
the
me.
fluoride, because you grew up where there's fluoride.
Oh, my
Good teeth.
Oh, that's right. There's no fluoride here, is there?
discussion?
Yes.
Not involving teeth.
Not about cavities? Fluoride?
Not my dentist.
Preferably real estate discussion.
Not about cavities? Okay.
Apparently, he does wisdom extractions, too, wisdom teeth extractions.
I would just want to say that I thought that there were some excellent proposals, just as the mayor mentioned, and I am hopeful that those who aren't going to enter into this process, should we end up with BlackRock at the end of the day, that the others will take a hard look at us and keep being interested. I'd also say that, in my opinion, the criteria were pretty clear. This is an option that we had. The mayor says he learned some things and would do it differently. I'm not sure that I would do it differently, because I think it provided the city the amount of flexibility that we want. We could have moved forward with proposals had it been 2 or 3 that were close. In this situation, we had an excellent SAG with a lot of experience. They not only read the proposals, but they had the added benefit that none of us have had of sitting through interviews. And everything that I've heard was that BlackRock did an amazing job, both the proposal but in the interview process as well. So I'm very comfortable with moving forward with an ENA and making clear that this doesn't have to be the end of the line. If we are not getting what we want and what the public wants as part of this process, then we will move on. And I think Dr. Bellari has done a great job of listening, and he's been involved in the city. I think he's going to do a good job, and I think he's going to do some great public outreach. So I'm supportive of this and ready to move forward.
Great, thank you.
I would agree with that. I like the idea also that I heard you guys say about that Dr. Valeri would perhaps include high school students in some of the work that's going on there. I think that would be tremendous opportunity for the high school students, a good skill that, just even observation would be great for them. I appreciate that he understands the topography of that area, and sort of being there and seeing that, is important. There needs to be lots of public outreach, public input, and it sounds like that's, certainly part of the plan. And as, Councilor Abma said, we will definitely, hold him and, any company to that. So appreciate it. I think it's going to be a tremendous opportunity. So, yeah. Thank you.
I just would repeat what the mayor and what others have said, that I hope that the other teams will still be interested. I think there are going to be some other exciting opportunities in Milwaukie, and I look for, and I also think some of the partners that some of those other proposals had should also be talking to Dr. Belluri and his team.
Anyone in specific?
Well, I do have a pet one, but I won't bring that up. But anyway, I look forward to it. I think it's a great move forward for the city.
Great, thank you.
No, I just agree with everything that you all said. I think I went back and I was looking through the minutes at the previous council meetings, and it was clear there was support for, creating a SAG and having that group really do a lot of hard work, technical work with that expertise in bringing a recommendation. So I really appreciate all of that work that you did. I think that was an important part of this process. I went back and I read all 9 proposals because I heard that critique as well. And I would say, even though I do think that the section that we've been discussing about the development offering selection process is very clear, that perhaps if we can improve on our RFQs in the process to make it very clear that tentative means just that, and we did mention, if applicable, in a certain section in that same timeline. And I think that maybe some better, more careful use of language in the RFQ is probably going forward a good idea.
Thank you.
Good point. We find out in so many ways how important wording actually is and how words can be interpreted. So that's an extremely good point. Second or third time in items just this evening that we've come across that. So.
So the city itself owns very few opportunities to control development to the degree that this does give us any control. And I think it was wise of our forefathers, previous councils to purchase real estate. We sit at a kind of interesting historic crossroads, and the blossoming, if you will, of Milwaukie. I think there is huge potential to set a tone for what the downtown will look like going forward. And I think as we only have 2 properties really to work. Yeah. I think what's there now is what you're going to see there for eternity. But in any case, the 2 big ones, I think it's critical that we are really thinking about the future. We are really thinking about what our downtown wants to look like in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And that the 2 buildings that we are involved with have the opportunity to set that tone, to set the bar, if you will, of the level of architecture, of the kind of services, of the general engagement with the community. That your proposal very aptly described. And I think that's large part of what won over the team. So I look forward to this process. I look forward to creating a building with you. And I look forward to the next few years as we build it.
I think it'll be, what's the word, catalytic? Or
Catalytic.
Milwaukie, so, yeah.
All right, you wanted to move before.
May I?
I can't
I would
move from
entertain a
over here.
motion.
I would move to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with BlackRock LLC for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek property.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an exclusive negotiating agreement with BlackRock LLC for the Coho Point at Kellogg Creek property. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You guys did a great job on this. Thank you so much. And thanks to the team that helped with the reviews and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. 3 in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for your faith in Milwaukie.
So the only thing that shows still on the agenda is the healthcare resolution that I brought to this agenda. And we got an opportunity, because we had a short work session, to dig into that and to begin to wordsmith that a little bit, because it was my ham-handed shot at a resolution. So we're going to do a little more research. We're going to do a little more wordsmithing over the next couple of weeks, and then bring that item back at the first meeting in September. So that brings us to council reports, and as I have no script, we are going to...
So unfortunately, on top of everything else, Jason Watts is on vacation. Who gets one of those? So he is hiding in the middle of the wilderness, and he will come back next week or next meeting with a script for you.
So I think between us, we might be able to pull something together. The first thing that I want to mention is that tomorrow night, we will be doing the kickoff to our Solarize campaign. It starts at 6:30. It will take place at the Masons Lodge.
Across the street.
Right across the street from City Hall. And it will be your opportunity to learn about our Solarize process and to consider putting solar on your home at a somewhat reduced rate and before the Oregon tax credits go away, which makes it a very reduced rate compared to what it'll be if you do this next year.
That's really important.
This Saturday is bulky waste collection day. If you live in the city of Milwaukie, we know a lot of people on Facebook and elsewhere are outside the city in unincorporated areas. This is only for City of Milwaukie residents. Through their garbage hauler, they will pick up bulky waste at the curb. This is not hazardous waste, but you're allowed to put out the equivalent of the size of a sofa, whether that's stuff out of your basement, your attic, your garage. I would just also pitch, please don't put electronics there. If you take electronics to Goodwill, they get recycled, whereas we don't know that they'll get recycled if you put them out at your curb.
I did just want to add that they're asking that we have those items bagged if possible and boxed if possible. So don't just put them out loose on the curbside. As much as possible, try and group them so that people can clear them. Last year, if you remember correctly, it took us a long time to provide service to the community. So the easier it is for the haulers to pick up, the better.
Library Construction Task Force has been meeting, and there's the first sort of bigger, broader public meeting opportunity at the Public Safety Building on August 29th. And my computer died before I wrote down the time.
It's probably 6:30.
I believe it's in the evening, of course.
And that's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday, so
So
Tuesday,
tonight.
August 29th at the Public Safety Building.
I will look that up
Those are the only
while,
two things.
I'm looking it up too.
Thank
want to wait
you.
on one second.
First Friday, before our next meeting,
yeah.
First Friday comes back on Friday, September 1st.
It is 6 p.m.
6
6
p.m.
p.m., okay.
6 p.m., yes.
6 to 8.
So that 6 p.m. refers to the library.
Not to
First Friday is 5 to 8.
Right. Well, and that's also the opening of Chris Haberman's new show called Little by Little, where 100 artists have been invited to do art on 8-inch square wood panels, similar to what the big 500 show at Christmas time is all about. And they will be exhibited in, I think it's 3 different places in the city of Milwaukee. But I believe it starts with an exhibit at City Hall and in the Fire Bay. Is that correct?
Yep, he is in the process of pulling that together this week.
Yeah. So that opens, and it'll be open all month. And every piece of art will be sold for $40, and a part of that money will go to children's art projects, nonprofit 501c3s, and so you'll be contributing to that as well as buying some interesting art. So I just have to add that I do have 10 pieces in there, so, but none of them will...
$40 a piece?
$40 a piece. Everything, no matter what it is, it's $40 a piece. But there's no artist name on the front, so you have to, kind of look around for what you want. But awesome opportunity to get some, fun, small pieces of art, and also celebrate First Friday at the same time, and, do all those fun things. So, yep. And it will be his exhibit will be up in 3 venues in Milwaukee all through the month of September, and the sale will continue through that time.
On August 26th, there will be a cleanup of Johnson Creek from 9 a.m. till noon, and then a barbecue to follow from noon to 2. If you would like to register for that, I don't even understand what that is. It says, register here, bit.do/cleanup2017.
Well, you could probably just go on Johnson Creek Watershed. That's a URL. Yeah, that's one of those short, tiny
Weird URLs, okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure you could just go on their Facebook too and find it. This is, I've never done it, but this is where you get to wade into the river.
Yeah,
Where you put on your muck boots and you
I registered.
you climb in the river, and they
Yeah.
discourge that most of the year, but now the water's low enough that they do it in late August.
It's a fun process, and we get a lot of stuff out of the creek and get a lot of, often do invasives and everything.
Was it something like 9,000 or 10,000 pounds last year they pulled out of the creek?
Yeah, it's
they
a
pulled
big
a lot
deal.
of stuff out of the creek.
I wanted to confirm that we can now put food scraps into...
Yes, and just to be very clear, we've had some questions about what constitutes a food scrap. So I actually learned some stuff. Let me just disclose what that is. Meat is a food scrap. You can put in your green waste. Dairy, cheeses, stuff like that, eggs, that can go in. The one that was surprising to me, pizza boxes can also be included in your green waste, and those will be recycled, since I've been cutting off the greasy part for years.
To
and
recycle
recycling
the other
top part. So I'm really excited it all goes in one place. And we are updating the website just to make sure that that content is all available for people to actually go on and check. But it's a lot of stuff that now constitutes food scrap, including things like...
And
Let's
the
make
other
that-
thing is the meat can go in there.
She said
And there
that.
was some discussion about that, and yes, it can go in there.
Correct.
Right, so to be very, very clear, in your can, that is marked yard waste.
Green.
Green.
I believe it is.
It actually-
it's brown.
Our-
It's brown.
It
Oh,
depends
this is
on-
part of the
I have a green
problem.
and a brown one.
Mine's
too.
green.
It
Green
depends on who
waste.
your pickup
Yep.
is. But
So your green waste
in
can.
the yard waste can,
Right.
you can now put your food scraps. So a lot of people have been asking for curbside composting for years. This is it. We got it. It goes right in your yard waste can. You don't even have another can to deal with.
And I have a young neighbor named Liam who is been asking for this for a long time, and he is super excited. So he said, Milwaukee moving forward.
Very good.
I also, before we close, you mentioned it at the work session. I just want to say that Mitch Neiman did a lot of good work for the city for several years, and I wish him well in his future endeavors.
Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah, we do.
Shane. I would certainly agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, he put on some outstanding events, the Orange Line opening, the last year's Parkways.
The umbrella parade, he did a ton.
He spearheaded the website. I mean, Mitch pulled off some
Vietnam
really
Wall.
hard stuff. So
Yeah.
he will be missed.
And he kept all of us kind of on track by making reservations for us and making sure we got where we're supposed to go and all kinds of things like that. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else?
No more.
And nothing else?
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We are adjourned.
The message I just got.